The night I met him, I was sitting upstairs on the balcony, brush in hand, sketching the couple below me. From here, I had the perfect view of my sister Chloe and the man she had just married. I should have been finishing their live portrait when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned and froze. Damian Cross, the young master of the Cross family, walked out onto the balcony wearing nothing but a white bathrobe. For a moment, I just stared. Who comes to a wedding like that? Jason Cole, his right-hand man, came out after him, carrying a jacket over one arm. "Boss," he said quietly, "you're going to get everyone's attention. You really should change." Damian didn't even look at him. "Relax, Jason," he said, leaning casually against the balcony railing. "I'm just here to watch." I put my brush down. He wasn't looking at the wedding. He was looking at me. Something about that stare made my chest tighten. I stood, tore the unfinished canvas from the easel and dropped it over the balcony. Gasps floated up from below, but I didn't care. I stepped toward him until there was only a few feet between us. "If you're going to watch me like that," I said, "you might as well talk to me." Damian's mouth curved into a slow, amused smile. "What do you want to talk about?" I held his gaze and asked the boldest question of my life. "Would you like to spend the night with me?" His eyes darkened, not with anger but with something far more dangerous. He didn't answer. He just reached for my wrist and led me down the corridor. He led me to his hotel room and shut the door softly behind us. I dropped my brush on the floor and faced him. He just stood there, quiet, watching me like he was waiting to see if I'd back out. I didn't. I untied my apron and let it fall to the floor. Then I reached for the belt of his bathrobe and gave it a light tug. "Sit." He sat, slow and deliberate. I climbed onto the bed and straddled his lap, my hands resting against his chest. "You're bold," he murmured, catching my wrist. Not to stop me, but to hold it there. "Then stop talking," I whispered back. He kissed me before I could say anything else. The kiss was rough and unrestrained, as if he'd been waiting for it all night. My hands tangled in his hair as his arms closed around me, pulling me closer. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about my family, my uncle, or the future they planned for me. For one night, I was just Lily. We didn't stop until morning. When I finally slipped out of that guest room, my hair a mess and my heart pounding, I wasn't thinking about the consequences. But the moment I stepped back into my house, reality hit me. Patty Monroe, my aunt, was sitting in the living room with her arms crossed. Chloe was beside her, still in her wedding jewelry, her expression sharp enough to cut glass. "Where were you last night?" Patty snapped before I could even take off my shoes. I didn't answer. "Who were you with?" she shouted, rising to her feet. Chloe's glare burned through me, but before she could speak, Richard Monroe, my uncle, my father's brother, walked in. Richard had always been the most terrifying presence in this house. Even as a child, I'd felt it, the way he watched me like I was a ghost from the past. Everyone knew he'd been in love with my mother. And now that she was gone, I was the reminder he couldn't get rid of. He wouldn't let anyone touch my face, not even when he punished me. "This face is hers," he once told me, "and no one marks what belongs to me." He came close now, too close, until I could smell the expensive cologne on his jacket. "Have you made up your mind?" he asked, his voice low. I knew what he meant, the marriage arrangement he'd been forcing on me for months. I glared at him. "Dream on." His eyes darkened. "You keep this up, and I'll lock you in the basement again." Before he could grab me, Logan stepped in. "Father, stop," he said coldly. Sophie Reed came looking for Lily. "We can't afford to offend the Reeds." Richard hesitated, then stepped back. I didn't wait. I ran straight to Sophie's car and told her to drive. We headed for the airport, but I never boarded the plane. Instead, I asked Sophie to bring me back to see my parents. I stood quietly in front of my parents' graves, my fingers brushing against the cold stone. Richard thought controlling me would make me obedient. But here, standing before the only two people who had ever loved me, I felt untouchable. Logan found me not long after. He didn't say a word, just walked straight up and slapped me so hard my head turned. The sting burned, but I smiled through the blood on my lip. "You're so stupid, Logan," I said evenly. "Uncle told you where I was, didn't he? He knew I'd be here, visiting the only people who ever cared if I lived or died." He raised his hand again, but this time, I caught his wrist. I stepped closer, looking him dead in the eye, Go ahead, I hissed. Hit me again. But do you dare touch my face that looks like hers? Logan's hand was still trembling when I finally let go of his wrist. He turned and left without another word. I stayed at my parents' graves a little longer, letting the anger settle into something sharper. By the time I got back to the house, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to keep running. Days later, Richard announced that we were all expected to attend an art gala, a gathering for the city's wealthy families. I didn't want to go, but Chloe insisted I show up. It wasn't until much later that I realized why. She had set me up. At the gala, I stayed quiet, sketching on a small notepad, trying to ignore the glances from the men around me. Then one of them accidentally spilled wine all over my dress. I went to the bathroom to clean up, but halfway down the hall, someone grabbed me from behind and shoved me into a lounge room. I hit the floor hard. 5 men closed in on me, laughing. But they had underestimated me. I swung a nearby glass bottle, catching one in the face, then shoved past the others and bolted out of the room. My hair was a mess, my dress torn, my breath coming fast, and that's when I saw him, Damian. He was standing near the back of the hall, his sharp gaze sweeping the crowd. When he saw me, his eyes narrowed. He walked toward me, steady and controlled, until he was standing right in front of me. "I've been looking for you," he said, his voice calm but heavy. Then his expression shifted as he took in my appearance. "Who did this to you?" I shook my head, still catching my breath. "It's nothing." His jaw flexed, but he didn't push. Instead, I stepped closer and asked, "Still single?" He didn't answer, so I added softly, "Want to sleep with me again?" This time, he didn't even pretend to hesitate. He caught my wrist, turned on his heel, and pulled me with him. I stumbled once, but he didn't stop, just kept walking, steady and sure. Until we were out of the gala, and into the hotel attached to the venue. He didn't say a word as he swiped a keycard at the front desk, took the room number and led me upstairs. The moment the door clicked shut, he pinned me gently against the wall, his breath warm against my ear. "I've missed you so much," he murmured. Before I could respond, his lips were on mine, rough, hungry. By the time morning came, the sheets were a mess and my legs felt like they didn't belong to me. As I slipped my heels back on, Damian pulled out a sleek black iPhone, the newest model, a 15 Pro Max, and placed it in my hand. "Accept my friend request," he said, his tone serious. "Don't make me wait. I need to be able to reach you." I nodded and took the phone. My family had never allowed me to keep a phone. They always took them away, claiming it was for my protection. This was the first thing anyone had ever given me that my family couldn't take away. When I returned home, Richard was waiting, the gala footage already playing on the big screen. Chloe was standing off to the side, pale and shaking. Richard grabbed her by the hair and dragged her across the room. "You set her up," he roared. Chloe cried out, denying it. I didn't say a word. I just sat on the couch, poured myself tea, and sipped it slowly while they fought. That night, Richard summoned me to his study. "You're meeting the Chen family's son next week," he said flatly. "You will marry him." "I won't," I said simply. His hand came down across my back before I could even move. Again, and again. By the time he was done, my skin burned with angry red marks. 2 nights later, I received a message on the phone Damian had given me. "Don't you miss me?" Before I could reply, he shared his location and asked, "Will you come yourself? Or should I come pick you up?" I slipped out after everyone was asleep, wrapped in a coat to hide the damage on my back. When I arrived, Damian was waiting. The moment I took off my coat, he saw the marks and went completely still. "What happened?" His voice was low, dangerous. I turned slightly, letting him see the full extent of it. "In my family, this is normal," I said quietly. He stared at me for a long moment, then stepped forward until we were nearly chest to chest. "I want to marry you," he said. I blinked. "You barely know me." "Then I'll spend the rest of my life learning," he said without hesitation. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready for marriage or love. When I heard Chloe was going to a bar a few days later, I called Damian and told him to meet me there. Chloe had once wanted Damian for herself, but he had rejected her. She'd had no choice but to marry someone else, and she never forgave me for it. So when she walked into the bar and saw me grab Damian by the collar and kiss him, her face went scarlet with rage. She stood frozen for a moment before storming out, humiliated. The scandal at the bar only made things worse. The very next day, Richard called me to his study. "You embarrass this family again," he said coldly. "This is exactly why you need to get married and settle down. The Chen family's son is still waiting for an answer. You'll marry him." I stood my ground. "I told you, I'm not marrying anyone you pick." His face darkened. "You don't get to choose, Lily." "I do," I shot back. "I will not spend my life the way you want me to." The next day, Richard did something I never thought he'd do. He dragged me by the wrist to my grandmother Eleanor's room. Eleanor was the only one in this house who had ever defended me. She was frail now, her memory slipping, but she still looked at me with soft eyes whenever I came to see her. Richard crouched by her bed and whispered into her ear. "Your sons died in a car crash," he said cruelly. "All because of you." Her hands trembled as his words sank in. Minutes later, I found her trying to take her own life. I lunged forward, grabbed the knife, and felt it slice across my palm. "Don't hurt her," I cried, tears blurring my vision. "If you need someone to punish, lock me up instead." Richard's face twisted with satisfaction. They dragged me down to the basement and threw me into a dark, windowless room. The floor moved, until I realized it was crawling with scorpions. My heart hammered, but I refused to scream. I grabbed the small bag of marbles Damian had once given me, my only keepsake, and used them to knock the creatures away, one by one, until the night was over. When they finally let me out, I was pale, shaking, but alive. When they finally let me out of the basement, my legs almost gave out under me. I stumbled into the hallway, breathing hard, my palm still bandaged from grabbing the knife. I didn't even have time to think before someone caught my arm. Damian. He didn't speak at first, just looked me over from head to toe, taking in the dark circles under my eyes, the stiffness in the way I moved. Then his hand closed around mine, firm and warm. "I know you want revenge," he said quietly. I swallowed hard. "I do." "Will you help me?" I asked. His jaw set and he nodded once, like a promise. From that moment on, Damian moved fast. First, he had his men trace every bank account under the Monroe and Chen names. Within a week, their accounts were frozen. Their businesses stalled, investors pulled out. The next blow was quieter, but cut deeper. Damian's team hacked into their private servers and leaked every ugly secret. They had bribes, affairs, backroom deals, straight to the media. The scandal spread like wildfire. Everywhere Chloe went, she heard whispers. Even Richard stopped going to his office, too ashamed to face the board. But the most satisfying strike was the one I delivered myself. When the Monroes claimed that I couldn't paint, that my work was fake, I issued a public challenge. "Prove it," I said at the press conference. "Let's paint, here and now. You choose the subject." The room was packed with reporters. But I lit a single candle, sat down, and painted. Stroke by stroke, I brought the image to life. By the end, my fingers were stained with wax, but the portrait was flawless. When I turned it around for the judges, the room went silent. Then came the applause. I received a standing ovation. I had beaten them with a single masterpiece. Chloe snapped that day. She lunged at me in public, screaming, but Damian caught her wrist mid-air. "Touch her again," he said coldly, "and you'll never walk again." The room went dead quiet. No one dared defend her. Logan and Charles thought they could run. They boarded a private jet in the middle of the night, but Damian had been waiting for them. By the time I woke up the next morning, his men had already dragged them back. Damian stood in front of me, calm as ever, and simply said, "They're yours now." When they shoved my uncle into the room, I didn't hesitate. I slapped him hard across the face. "Confess," I said, my voice steady. Richard glared at me with the same hatred he had worn all my life. "No." Damian's sister-in-law stepped forward, pressed a knife to his throat, and whispered, "Say it. Or bleed." Richard's mask cracked. His face twisted with rage, as he finally shouted, "I killed your parents." The room went still. My heart pounded so hard it hurt, but I didn't look away. Damian's men dragged Logan in next, shoving him into the same room as his father. I turned to face them both one last time. "Only one of you walks out," I told them. Then we locked the door and left. Minutes later, a single gunshot rang out. When the door was opened again, Logan was standing over his father's body. the gun still in his hand. When the door opened again, Logan was standing over his father's body, the gun still in his hand, his chest heaving. But this time, it wasn't just Damian's men who were there. 2 police officers stepped forward, their badges glinting under the light. "Logan Monroe," one of them said, "you're under arrest." Logan didn't resist. He just let the gun fall to the floor with a dull thud, his expression empty as they cuffed him and led him away. A few days later, Damian took me for a walk through the park. The snow crunched softly beneath our boots, the world quiet for once. He stopped and turned to me, dropping to one knee. The small box in his hand looked so simple, so out of place against the white snow. "Lily," he said softly, "will you finally let me love you, without revenge between us?" For a moment, I just stared at him. Then I stepped forward, grabbed him by the collar, and kissed him hard. When I pulled back, snowflakes were caught in his hair. "Yes," I whispered.